The way she said it still echoes in my head like a slap that never quite stops stinging. I'm done listening to your feelings and needs, okay? You're too emotional for a man. It wasn't even a scream. It was worse than that. Calm. Cold. Like she'd been waiting for that moment. Like she'd rehearsed the line in her head until it was sharp enough to cut. We were standing in our kitchen. Early evening. The city outside hummed softly through the open balcony doors. The air smelled like rain and burnt garlic because dinner had gone wrong. But that wasn't what fell apart that night. It was us. She leaned against the counter with her arms crossed, that faint smirk she got whenever she thought she'd won an argument playing at her lips. Her eyes didn't even meet mine anymore. I'd been talking, trying, stupidly, to explain how I felt disconnected, how she'd been distant, how every conversation turned into some subtle competition of who could care less. And she just dropped that line like a brick. Too emotional. Funny how the thing you love most about yourself, your capacity to feel deeply, can become ammunition in the wrong hands. I didn't argue back. Not that night. I just stood there, staring at the reflection of the two of us in the glass door. Me, jaw tight, eyes tired. Her, arms folded, detached, beautiful in a way that suddenly felt cruel. Inside, something clicked. Quietly. The kind of click that happens before a lock slides shut. I said, noted. That was it. 2 syllables. Calm. Even. She smirked again, thinking I was conceding that she'd won. But she didn't realize that word wasn't surrender. It was a full stop. From that night, something inside me went silent. Not broken, just done. For months, I'd been carrying the relationship like a heavy box, careful not to drop it even when my arms started shaking. But after that night, I set it down. I stopped explaining myself, stopped trying to make her understand. When she asked how my day was, I said, good. When she said she was tired, I said, okay. When she kissed me, I kissed back. But there was no depth left. It wasn't bitterness. It was distance. Calculated, practiced silence. I used to tell her everything. My fears, my goals, my thoughts at 2 a.m. when I couldn't sleep. She used to call me her safe place. I believed her. I thought vulnerability was strength, that sharing your mind made you closer. Turns out, with her, it just gave her a map of where to strike. So I stopped giving her a map. Meanwhile, life outside that apartment didn't stop. Work kept moving. Deadlines, projects. A promotion that I didn't even tell her about because, honestly, I didn't want to hear that I was too proud or making it about myself. Then came the offer. Out of nowhere, a company from another state reached out. A bigger role, better pay, a chance to start over, to breathe. I read the email 3 times. I didn't feel excitement right away, just clarity. For the first time in a long while, my future didn't feel like it was tied to someone else's comfort. I didn't tell her. Not a word. Every day that passed after that email felt like a rehearsal for my exit. I'd wake up, make her coffee, listen to her, complain about her coworkers, nod at the right times, and silently imagine the sound of a moving truck pulling up outside. I started sorting through my stuff late at night when she was asleep. The documents, the personal files, my old journals, anything that was mine alone. I deleted photos from my phone that felt too sentimental, not out of anger, just preparation. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and thought I was just being moody again. The irony was almost poetic. She used to say I was too expressive, too emotional, and now when I gave her nothing, she didn't even flinch. She was comfortable in the silence because she thought it meant control. A few weeks later, we were at dinner with friends. She laughed louder than usual, performing as always. At one point, her friend's boyfriend started sharing a story about how he'd been feeling burned out at work. I saw how she rolled her eyes and whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear. Men are so dramatic lately. Everyone laughed. I smiled too. Because in that moment, I realized I was done. Not angry, not sad, just finished. When you reach that kind of quiet ending, it's not fireworks, it's gravity. You stop orbiting around someone who no longer sees you. The weeks blurred together after that. I finalized everything with the new company, handled logistics, quietly updated my address on every account that mattered. The new place was 3 states away. The date was set, and I said nothing. We still lived together like nothing was happening. She'd scroll through her phone while we watched TV, half listening when I spoke. I'd glance at her, wondering how I ever mistook indifference for confidence. One night she came home late from drinks with her coworkers. She kicked off her heels, laughed at something on her phone, and looked at me. "You're quiet again," she said. "You've been acting weird lately." I shrugged. "Just tired." "From what?" she scoffed, tossing her bag onto the couch. "You barely talk anymore." I feel like I live with a ghost. I wanted to say, "You made me one," but I didn't. I just nodded and went back to my laptop. That silence, it unnerved her more than any argument ever could. A few days later, she tried to bring up us. Said she missed how open I used to be, how in tune I was. I wanted to laugh. The same woman who mocked me for feeling too much was now complaining that I didn't feel enough. But I gave her what she'd earned. Nothing. I listened. I nodded. I said, "I'll think about it." She smiled, satisfied, as if she'd just fixed something. In reality, the lease was already canceled. My last paycheck had already been rerouted. My boxes were in storage, labeled and ready. I started taking photos off the walls, just a few at a time so she wouldn't notice. I replaced my spot in the closet with her extra coats. It looked like I was fading out of my own life, and somehow that felt right. The night before everything changed, we had dinner together like normal. She talked about her weekend plans, about brunch and shopping, about how one of her friends was finally getting proposed to. I chewed my food, nodded at the right times, and thought about how, by tomorrow afternoon, the moving truck would be outside. When she went to bed, I stood in the living room for a while. The quiet buzz of the fridge was the only sound. I looked around at the apartment, the furniture we'd picked out, the curtain she insisted on, the framed photo from our trip to the coast. It all looked like a museum of a life that never quite existed. There was no anger left, just an understanding. You can't build a life with someone who only hears you when you're silent. I turned off the lights, walked into the bedroom, and lay down beside her. She was already asleep, her breathing soft and steady. For a second, I wondered if I should tell her, if she deserved that much. But then I remembered that night in the kitchen, her voice cold, final. "You're too emotional for a man." And I realized she'd already told me everything I needed to know. I closed my eyes. Tomorrow I'd be gone, and she'd have no idea. The morning sunlight hit the blinds in thin golden stripes. I woke up before the alarm, before her, before the city had even begun to stir. It was strange, that sense of calm before something irreversible. My bag was already by the door, clothes folded neatly, laptop packed, keys separated into two piles, mine and hers. I stood there for a long minute, looking at her sleeping. She looked peaceful, unaware, still clutching her phone loosely in her hand like she always did. The faint buzz of a notification lit up her screen, painting her face in blue for a second before it faded. I didn't hate her. That surprised me. Hate is loud. What I felt was quiet, the kind of quiet that means acceptance. I made coffee like I always did, the same way she liked it. 1 spoon of sugar, almond milk, light foam. Routine is a powerful disguise. When she walked into the kitchen, hair messy, eyes half open, she smiled faintly. "Morning." "Morning," I said. She sipped the coffee, leaning against the counter, the same counter where she'd once told me I was too emotional for a man. "What are you up to today?" she asked. I could have said it right there. Could have told her that in 3 hours, a moving truck would be parked downstairs, and that by sundown, I'd be 3 states away, living a life she knew nothing about. Instead, I smiled. "Got some errands to run." She nodded, distracted by her phone. "All right, don't forget we have dinner at my sister's later." "Right," I said. I watched her scroll, her thumbs tapping like she was composing the next version of her own reality. She didn't even look up when I walked to the door. I paused there, hand on the doorknob, and whispered, not for her, but for myself, "Goodbye." Then I left. The air outside felt different, sharper, colder. It had that crisp electric energy of change, like the universe was quietly acknowledging a shift. The moving truck arrived 10 minutes later. The driver was a quiet guy, mid-40s, baseball cap pulled low. He nodded at me. You the one heading to Raleigh? Yeah, I said. He looked at the boxes stacked by the curb. You packed light. Yeah, I said again, smiling faintly, leaving the heavy stuff behind. He didn't ask what I meant. By the time everything was loaded, my phone buzzed. A message from her. Can you grab some bread on your way back? I stared at it for a long moment. The sheer normalcy of it almost made me laugh. Bread. As if the only thing missing in our life was toast. I pocketed the phone and got in the truck. The driver asked, You want the radio on? Sure, I said. A low hum of music filled the silence. Some old song about running away and never looking back. Fitting. As the city started to shrink in the rearview mirror, I watched it disappear. The skyline, the apartment, her. Every block we passed felt like a piece of noise being peeled away. For the first time in years, I could hear myself think. It took her exactly 4 hours to realize. I know because my phone lit up with call after call, then messages. Where are you? Your stuff's gone? Is this a joke? Call me now. I didn't answer. I just watched the notifications roll in as the miles stretched between us. The last message came around noon. I don't understand. What's happening? I typed out a reply and stared at it for a while before hitting send. You said you were done listening to my feelings and needs. I heard you. I just made sure you'd never have to hear them again. I turned off the phone. The driver glanced at me but didn't say a word. By evening, I was standing in an empty apartment 3 states away. Bare walls, fresh air, new keys in my pocket. No history, no ghosts. I dropped my bag on the floor and sat down in the middle of the room. It was quiet, but not the suffocating kind I'd known before. This silence had space in it. It felt like possibility. A few hours later, I checked my phone again. Dozens of missed calls, a few voicemails. I didn't listen to them right away, but eventually curiosity got the better of me. The first one was angry. How could you just leave like that, without saying anything? Are you out of your mind? The second one cracked a little. I don't get it. You didn't even tell me you were unhappy. I thought we were okay. The third one was quiet. I'm sorry, I didn't mean what I said. I was frustrated. Please just call me. I deleted them all. Not out of spite, but because there was nothing left to fix. You can't apologize for erasing someone's voice and expect them to speak again. Weeks passed. I settled into the new city. The job was demanding but fulfilling. People actually listened when I talked. I didn't have to filter myself or shrink to fit someone else's comfort. Every now and then, I'd catch myself thinking about her. Not in longing, but in observation. The way someone might glance at an old scar and remember how it happened. Not because it hurts anymore, but because it once did. She texted once more, months later. I hope you're doing okay. No apology this time, just that. I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because peace doesn't need an audience. One night, I was sitting on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the lights stretch across the city below. It was the same kind of quiet I used to beg for in our old place, only now it didn't feel empty. There's something surreal about starting over, about realizing that sometimes walking away isn't an act of escape, but of preservation. People always say silence is the loudest revenge. I disagree. It's not silence that gets them. It's peace, the kind that doesn't include them anymore. A few months later, a mutual friend called. She's been asking about you, he said. Wanted to know if you're seeing anyone. I laughed softly. Tell her I'm seeing things clearly now. That's enough, he chuckled. Man, you really left her blindsided. I didn't answer, because it wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about finally realizing that love isn't proven by how much pain you endure to keep it alive. A year later, I went back to the city for work. Different hotel, different skyline. But when I passed near the old neighborhood, something made me stop. The cafe we used to go to was still there. Same smell of espresso and rain-soaked pavement. I ordered a coffee and sat by the window, watching people pass by. Then I saw her. Same hair, same walk, phone still in her hand. She looked older somehow, not in years but in weight. The kind of heaviness that comes from realizing you pushed away something that wasn't replaceable. She didn't see me. I could have waved. could have said something. But some stories don't need sequels. Some goodbyes are better left unspoken. I finished my coffee, left a tip, and stepped back into the street. The rain had just started again. Soft, steady, cleansing. I walked without looking back, because she'd been right about one thing that night, in a way she never understood. I was emotional, and that emotion is exactly what saved me. It made me aware, made me real, made me leave when I finally understood that being too emotional for a man just meant being human enough to know when love turns into silence. And sometimes the only way to be heard is to say nothing at all.